You are a sickening, brainless meanie.
I am not.
This is Cuboy, esteemed member of the Ultimate Friend Force, obscure yet iconic Adobe Flash character, and accidental purveyor of 2 masterclasses in the point-and-click genre.
The name's Cuboy, your local ultimate friend.
Cuboy first came onto the foray of Newgrounds in the late 2000s, amidst the heyday of weird British internet humour, which combined lol random with dry wit. Think Ed's World, Salad Fingers, Astaf, etc. He initially started out in a Flash web series of his namesake, simply entitled Cuboy, where he went on various exploits to save the world, save the circus, or save a failing musician from exercising his own poor judgment.
I will not witness the demise of over-manufactured music. We will strive to get you back on track. What can I do to return your inspiration?
Cuboy would regularly be joined by a broad cast of characters, such as his arch-nemesis Esquire Pedrino, who for some inexplicable reason happens to be a talking cat.
I punched an old woman in the head, Super Tom.
Or his fellow compatriot in the Ultimate Friend Force, Ranksworth, who secretly hates his guts.
Ranksworth, I always knew you were a barrel. I'm afraid I have no choice but to put you down.
What?
Whoa, hold your horses, Cuboy.
He would be joined by none more often than Boss B. McBoss, the leader extraordinaire of the UFF, to whom Cuboy pledges an unfailing allegiance. It is through Boss that assignments are given, plots are begun, and congratulations are received, with his performances in the show only being ever so slightly less off the wall than Cuboy's own antics.
Time for your next assignment. I need you to fetch me 1 glass of water.
On it, boss fellow.
The show was created by a small, now largely inactive Flash studio called Edible Castle, partly famous for their original web series of the same name, along with some other strange front pages over the years. Run by Will Arbuckle and Andy Dennis as designer and writer respectively, Cuboy ended up being their flagship show, leading well into the meme scene of the early 2010s, backed by a British disposition with a charming visual profile to boot. Cuboy really hit the big time, however, when he had his own game made called Back to the Cubeture. You've already unwittingly witnessed part of the intro. Esquire Pedrino is on a mission to mess with the space-time continuum, and only Cuboy can stop him in his tracks. He's transported back in time to the Wild West, where he must point and click his way to victory, with the occasional draw and shoot as he goes.
You deserve a swift bullet to the face, or thereabouts.
Its popularity led to a sequel, albeit 4 years later, Back to the Cubeture 2, featuring a hybrid time setting and a much bigger map. Cuboy begins his expedition the way he ended his last, upside down. He brings his cowboy outfit with him, and with the place already uncertain as to whether it's Greek or Roman, it's clear that space-time is already in ruins. Or maybe just nobody cares for continuity, since beyond that, there's a child with an inhaler, a sailor with a battery-powered engine, and a gardener who threatens to sue you.
If you try touch me, I sue you.
Now don't be silly, Cuboy is your best friend and you know it.
There's a big question you probably have as a viewer, however. Why are we talking about this? The simple reason is that Back to the Cubeture is a brilliant display, albeit quite a brief one, in how to make a great point-and-click adventure game. In terms of design, there's a lot that the Cubeture games do right, and while their quality is somewhat marred now by the inevitable Ruffle ports which came after the death of Adobe Flash, they have not lost an ounce of their charm since. So let's talk about this cuberific adventure, and the mechanics which make it an unexpected model for its genre. The first thing you'll notice about Back to the Cubeture is that it does indeed take place on a cube. The top is made up of tiled squares comprising a 5x5 grid. It is within this grid that the magic happens. When you hover your cursor over a square, it lights up a little bit, letting you know it's ready for clicking. So long as the path is surmountable and there's nothing in the way, Cuboy will tip-tap over to whichever square you send him. If there is something in the way, Cuboy might still make a maneuver, so long as the clicked square is interactable. He can pick up this key, recover this branch, and he can even spit in this bin. This is helped along by an intuitive, uncluttered menu system with lots of enjoyable, clue-ridden flavor text, subtly pointing you towards the next step you ought to take.
Drunk or not, those sounded like directions to me, Cuboy.
Whenever you pick something up, you'll soon know what to do with it. And rather than dealing with the usual adventure game nonsense, where you have to point at a really specific pixel before your character engages, so long as you're on the relevant square, that's good enough for Cuboy. Better yet, the game will even change your cursor to let you know, yep, that's interactable, you should give that thing a whirl. Both cubeture games are members of the Isometric Clicking Club, and honestly, I think more games need to take note. If you've only got 25 clear squares to look at, you can never get stuck on some late-nest coin hunt, clicking all over the entire screen, looking for the rope that you need to tie to a shoe or whatever else. I'm not saying that all adventure titles must be transformed into mini chessboards. Cuboy's solution to the point-and-click problem is particularly novel, but designers in the genre ought to consider whether or not their worlds naturally lend themselves to clear mouse interaction. At the very least, it isn't hard to borrow the design feature of making the items easy to find and pick up, which to this day, adventure games are still struggling to do.
Don't let it bother you, Cuboy, my boy. He may have just given you some useless fish bones, but he is a lowly fish merchant.
Yeah.
And you're the ultimate friend!
Yeah, I know.
Good lad. Now let's go and kick Pedrino's ears off!
Yes, let's.
Despite being comprised, for the most part, of cuboid humans, both the cubeture games have a great deal more fluidity and character in their animation than one might expect. In Back to the Cubeture 1, with it being the Wild West and all, you're put into shooting situations relatively often. These mini-games are as cowboy as they come. The first shooter to draw wins, and the deaths of the loser are always a great source of entertainment. No two deaths will ever look the same, but all of them play out creatively with the art style of Cube Earth.
I am a winner.
Both games also have a lot of outfits for Cuboy to wear, with his transitions into them being visually pleasing and rather seamless. His wardrobe hits its peak in Cubeture 2, with the clothes having more than just a cosmetic value. Certain outfits change the dialogues of other characters, and lots of them are hidden behind various Easter eggs, with one secret outfit making Cuboy much faster than usual. The potential for customization is unexpectedly high, but it's a welcome touch, another bit of eccentric flavour which helps keep the game fresh and vibrant. All granted, they're not perfect games. The second game in particular runs into more issues, perhaps due in part to its extended length. The minigames don't always land super well for a variety of reasons. Most of them take on a 2D form, which seems a little dissonant from the otherwise cubified visual style. It also doesn't help that the Ruffle port makes some of them a little jumpy, and outright breaks one of them entirely. The original Cubeture's draw, in spite of its simplicity, remains iconic for me, in part for its faith to the source material, and in part for the oddly comedic suspense of each encounter. Back to the Cubeture 2 also chooses to engage in the banal adventure game practice of random inventory rubbing, which I don't think anybody likes, although thankfully it doesn't do this all too often. The bigger issue is that about halfway through, the game becomes oddly cryptic, with the unwelcome return of bizarre point-and-click logic simultaneously paired with a reduction in the amount of useful clues that Boss B McBoss would typically give you. Perhaps sticky midpoints of this nature are inevitable in point-and-click games. The puzzle element needs to come from somewhere.
Have I just accidentally made an axe joke?
But honestly, you can't be too harsh on these titles. Despite being made by a tiny part team of 3, both games have been produced to a remarkably polished standard. They're well written, highly engaging, easier to play, and above all, they're well voiced. The game's writer, Andy Dennis, provides 16 of the voices, and that's just in the sequel. In the original, he's a VA for a further 11 characters.
This song makes me want to hit you less.
You can think what you like. I'm too happy to be fazed by your naysaying.
They're all very distinctive voices too. I had no idea it was the same actor behind all these different people. Will Arbuckle also does a fine job with his iconic character, Boss B McBoss, and the other occasional voice actors they bring in all knock it out of the park. It's probably worth mentioning here that they got David Firth to play Hades.
Actually, I don't. It makes my bowels ache.
Two more modern audiences, and by modern, I mean about 15 years later, way past the early 2010s and now into the mid-20s, this humour may come across as a little dated. It is very, very much of its time, the kind of lol funny, super random, weird subversion comedy, which is now only ever done semi-ironically to avoid coming off as totally corny. Cuboy has the added bonus of that dry British wit, however, which helps him land deadpan lines while approaching immaturity in a strangely sophisticated manner.
Take my clothing as a token of appreciation. Actually, I don't really want your clothes. Just take it! Very well!
It doesn't quite hit the comedic heights of other unapologetically British adventure games. Simon the Sorcerer still just about wins in that department, but what the Cubeture lacks in humour, it makes up tenfold in design, which is remarkable given that neither of its creators are game designers at their core. Meanwhile, Simon et al. Infamously led players into the inventory-rubbing hellscape, which few have managed to leave without the help of various walkthroughs and online guides. Unfortunately, Cuboy has been dulled by the blade of time, or rather dulled by the death of Adobe Flash. For whatever reason, as previously mentioned, Ruffle has had a lot of trouble with Cuboy. Cubeture 1's boss fight is made oppressively difficult in the port, while Cubeture 2 cannot be beaten online due to issues with its minigames. Thankfully, not all hope is lost. If you download the SWF from the Internet Archive and use Clean Flash instead of Ruffle, it seems to work just fine. It's a little bit of an unexpected hassle, but still not much for a free game, and I'd implore you to make time for it, even if you're just a tad interested. For me, Cuboy's charm hasn't worn off, and in some ways he feels quite innocent, an artifact of a bygone internet era in which animated slapstick reigns supreme. In a world now full to the brim with continuously abstract self-referential memes, there is something oddly quaint in Cuboy's back-to-basics approach. The face-slap high-fives, the myriad of funny accents, the faux evil antagonist, the female horse, inexplicably named Dave. The humour matches neatly up to the design of the game itself. It's approachable, straightforward, yet oddly satisfying. Back to the Cubeture, ironically enough, is a time capsule all of its own. A nostalgic look back into the late golden era of Newgrounds. Just as many of the site's creators were beginning to jump ship and fully migrating to YouTube, Cuboy seemed to trail off and disappear from public life. He never got a sequel, and will likely never see a trilogy. But his isometric innovations should not go unnoted, and his particular titles serve as a testament to what Flash games can achieve. No publisher, no budget, no sales campaign. Just raw, unadulterated silliness, served in a highly polished box, which you'd gladly pay money for otherwise. May the legend of Cuboy forever live on in our cube hearts. See you all later.
What's my name? Cuboy's my name. Cuboy's the name. Cuboy's the game. That doesn't make any sense. La-da-da, doody-doo. I'm up. What's my name?